Hello, my name is Silas Shu, and I'm a second-year PhD student at UIUC. Thanks for your interest in this paper. Today, we're going to talk about feed settings, an exploration of the problems regarding them, and possible solutions. Have you ever browsed your social media feed or list of recommendations and have had content that you really didn't want to see? Or maybe not that, but had a bunch of the content and ads be repetitive and irrelevant? It turns out, as users, we often have ways of controlling what we see on our feeds to some extent via control settings. Some examples are settings like hide this post, or ad settings because ads appear in feeds, and more. But not everybody knows these settings exist or use them for the right reasons. In this study, we found that 50% did no better than random when surveyed about the existence of feed settings on Facebook, yet 94% used at least one feed setting when taken on a guided tour of Facebook. Everybody had trouble finding feed settings when asked. And a significant minority of participants were using settings based on false assumptions, especially ad settings. So why might this be a problem? Past work has suggested the benefits of providing feed settings and making them accessible. One study has shown that users that experienced the feed with settings were more satisfied with the feed than those users without settings. Feeds are often curated by algorithms or AI, and guidelines recommend the inclusion of settings for software that relies on AI. One study of folk theories on social media feeds found that control settings were one of the ways that people understood how their feeds worked. For this work, we aim to uncover and diagnose the issues that could hinder users from enjoying the benefits of feed settings. The first step was asking what categories of feed settings existed. This not only enabled us to select the settings to focus on, but also allowed us to construct a vocabulary for this and future work. Then, we asked what feed settings people believe exist, as users must know about settings to use them. In fact, one of the reasons we did this work was because privacy researchers have uncovered unawareness of privacy settings, which could lead to unintended information disclosure. Next, we asked what navigational difficulties people had, because people must navigate to and find settings on the user interface to use them. And finally, we asked what feed settings people used and why to investigate the implications of unawareness. For our first research question, categories of feed settings, we focused on feed consumption settings, given how feed consumption and feed curation influence society today. This involved manually cataloging hundreds of examples of settings on 11 major social media and search websites in the US. These included, but were not limited to, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Google, and Amazon. Two independent coders then iteratively categorized the collected examples of settings. The coding process eventually resulted in 9 representative categories of feed settings. I explained 2 of them here. One we call feed priority example settings, which cover familiar settings like hide post, see if you are like this, or see this person first. We named it like this because these settings work with specific examples of feed content. Another, less traditional category would be account deletion settings, because account deletion removes feed access. Armed with these categories of feed settings, we investigated our remaining research questions about feed setting issues with an in-person user study. Here's an overview of that study. This study uses Facebook as a platform because of its large number of users and many settings that have analogs on other websites. The first part, a settings existence survey, was aimed to assess awareness of feed settings. The second part, setting finding tasks, was aimed to assess navigational issues with feed settings. And the final part aimed to find out the implications of unawareness and assess how people used feed settings. We made an effort to recruit a representative sample of Facebook users. All age groups had significant representation. Racially, all groups had representation too. The first part of the study, Settings Existence Survey, was a series of 35 questions worded, on Facebook, do you think a setting or group of settings exists to blank? We picked examples of settings to represent the categories of feed settings we developed earlier. In addition, to better assess knowledge, 11 of the settings were examples that did not exist on Facebook. In addition, to collect more data, we ran just this part of the study on Amazon Mechanical Turk. For the second part, we asked participants to attempt 6 setting-finding tasks on Facebook. All participants were asked to complete the same tasks sequentially. To reduce learning effects, these tasks were chosen and piloted carefully. We sorted the tasks in order of difficulty and minimized overlaps in interface areas where we expected people to navigate. 2 examples of our tasks were to turn off birthday notifications and to permanently delete one's account. In addition, to help us diagnose navigational difficulties, we asked participants to think out loud while doing these tasks. In the last part, we took participants on a comprehensive tour of feed settings on Facebook. For each group of settings that participants encountered, we asked them these questions. Have you ever used any of these settings? And would you want any of these settings to be different? Okay, so what did we find out from that study? I will organize the results by theme. First, how aware of feed settings were participants? Let me walk you through this figure. This heat map provides a summary of all 75 participants' responses from the Settings Existence Survey on Mechanical Turk, which looked about the same as our in-person participants. Each row represents one question about the existence of a feed setting. Each column represents one participant's answers. Greens are participants' beliefs that matched actual settings existence. The purples on the top are false positives, which are non-existing settings that participants thought existed. And reds are false negatives, which are existing settings that participants didn't think existed. Blacks are I don't know responses. We noticed some interesting clusters in the data. First, there's a group of participants on the left that think that most feed settings don't exist. And then there's another group on the right that think most feed settings do exist. And then there's those in between. Statistically, half the participants did no better than random on this survey. What about trends in settings? People tended to believe that notification settings and feed tweaking settings existed, whether real or not. On the other hand, people tended to disbelieve in the existence of ad settings. So does it matter that participants aren't aware of many settings? The guided tour of settings suggests so. 94% of participants changed at least one setting during the tour. People generally thought that ad settings didn't exist on our survey, but 80% of participants changed at least one ad setting on our guided tour. Next theme. What difficulties did participants encounter when they were trying to find feed settings? Participants completed our navigation tasks with varying degrees of success. Only 3 out of 36 participants found a correct setting for all 6 tasks. But notably, all participants encountered at least some level of difficulty in at least one task. Here, I will go over a sample of some of the most common themes. One difficulty that every participant experienced was mistaken associations. People navigate by clicking on buttons that have a logical relationship with the task at hand. While this often works, often this expectation was not realized. One example was the Events link on Facebook's homepage. When tasked with turning off birthday notifications, participant 7 and other participants clicked on the link, reasoning, "Birthdays are events, that might have something." Unfortunately, events did not have anything that would accomplish the task, which increased frustration. Another common problem was not finding settings because they were scanning for a keyword on the interface, but that keyword was not present. For example, for the task of turning off sounds from private messages, many participants were looking for the word sound in the notification settings. Very few expected the relevant setting to actually be under the heading browser. Participants often missed interface elements. As a demonstration, the list on the right is Facebook's organization of its general settings. Many participants missed the heading that said ads when trying to turn off ad personalization. we encountered 2 instances where participants refused to do tasks because of a strong prior doubt of existence of the setting. Participant 5 said, "Turning off ad targeting is not possible because the Zuck wants money and ads are how he does it." Participant 34 refused to find an account deletion setting, saying, "Facebook holds on to you for the rest of its existence." Based on our participants' behavior, we make several design recommendations on how to alleviate these navigational difficulties. I will only talk about some of them here, so we invite you to read the full paper for more. First, to handle all the different ways people think about settings and tasks, multiple paths to the same setting might accommodate this diversity. Second, we notice many participants iterating through settings top to bottom, and sometimes missing settings. A search function and reducing visual complexity could improve upon this strategy. And as a final example, a mixed initiative approach, which guesses what settings users might want to use, could assist by making users both aware of settings and making them easier to find. So that covers navigation. Lastly, we noticed patterns in how people understood feed settings and assumptions in their function. We noticed some participants' reasons for using settings did not quite match up with what the settings did. 28% of participants turned off ad personalization, assuming that it would make fewer ads show up on Facebook. A separate 28% of participants turned off ad personalization because they believed it would stop Facebook from sharing data with advertisers. Our final navigation task was to find a setting that deleted one's account permanently, but 23% of participants selected a setting that deactivated one's account instead. So what does this mean? We make a couple of observations. First, we expect settings that are machine learning based, or that are not completely deterministic, to be more prone to false assumptions. For example, unfollow is fairly easy to grasp, but turn off ad personalization and see less like this give more rooms for assumptions about the settings. Second, future work should further investigate the effects of these false assumptions, but for now, we think it's prudent to try to minimize it for the respective users. One suggestion to do this is to make the explanations for settings more concise and readable. For example, Facebook's ad setting explanations are hundreds of words of prose, and participants were missing the parts that said the settings don't control ad frequency. So here's our major takeaways. In this study, we found evidence of feed setting unawareness, difficulties of navigation, and misunderstandings of settings on Facebook. While I would caution overgeneralizing beyond Facebook, we expect our design guidelines and participants' thought patterns to generalize to other websites. Future work can further explore implications of these issues and solutions. In conclusion, control over feeds and AI systems is not only a factor in satisfaction, but also respect towards and dignity of users. Given the widespread use of feeds, it is my sincere hope that this research will be able to advance this social need. A couple of acknowledgements. Thanks to NSF for funding this research, and a big thanks to everybody that participated in our studies. I would also like to thank the Social Spaces Group, Wenxuan Shi, and Yiran Ho for their help and feedback. And finally, thank you for listening. Goodbye.